Hey everybody, Hoople's Cat. Pandemics. What do we need to know? Well, as I already mentioned, you need to have alcohol hand wash and gloves and stuff like that. Now I'm in the fortunate position whereby I have access to gear and equipment. This is just a basic painter's type equipment. You'd wear this and you would take it off and dispose of it. And that would give you a measure of protection. None of these materials, except for a couple of them, are actually waterproof. So if vomiting, nausea, diarrhea are affected, you're actually going to be better off buying cheap plastic aprons. Those sorts of things are going to work well. What also is going to work well is rubber boots, Wellington boots as English call them, because Wellington boots can be cleaned. So what you want to have access is to bleach. You want to mix up bleach and you want to use bleach. So this is about if you are going into an area where people are contaminated. This is a slightly upgraded version of the painter suit that you can get for hospital wear. Again, the only point of this barrier, unless you're wearing a full NBC gear, is to remind you not to touch the person or surfaces that may be contaminated. In hospitals, the traditional yellow gown, I think a yellow gown in most places, when you put it on, if you want to know how to put these on, is it goes on like this, with the ties at the back, because you don't want to be touching anybody. And this just reminds you not to. This gives you a measure of protection. It does not protect you in a pandemic. It just reminds you not to touch the source of infection and then walk out the room and touch another source of infection. So to take it off, you take it off, and we'll show this later on in the reel sort of thing, gently, without touching the outside surfaces. And you don't drop it on the floor. You put it into a plastic bag and you seal it up, and eventually, if you have to, you boil wash twice if you can to clean it. Now, like I said, I don't actually have any plastic aprons for cooking, but I advise you get some. You know, 4 or 5, even 10 of them will be a useful thing to have. I don't have any because we don't use them for cooking, and in a pandemic I have supplies. This is more waterproof, more resilient. This is more what I would wear dealing with casualties who are infected. What you will see, what you'll be probably buying, some of you, and again, don't, is this kind of thing, the disposable apron. Again, this plays into the fear factor. People feel that an isolation gown with ties is actually protective. It isn't. It's a mental reminder not to touch the person with this and then spread it elsewhere. Same principle, back to front. And you can just see how flimsy this thing is. Fluids will go straight through it, so you don't want that. So that's how you protect yourself from getting contaminated in right now. Use a barrier, and I recommend for most people who don't have access to hospital gear, and even if you do you really need to buy it? I don't know, I don't think so. Get yourself a good quality plastic apron. Have a few of them. When you take it off gently and put it in a bucket of high concentrated bleach and leave it there. After a day or two, hang it up, let it dry. Same with your shoes. You want your boots to be waterproof, and maybe have 2 or 3 pairs of cheap Wellington boots into the bleach to disinfect it. Hand gloves. Hand gloves, yeah, disposable hand gloves, nitrile gloves, all that stuff. Yeah, we all love them, and they have a place. And frankly, I have boxes and boxes of them. And that's probably what I would use. But for the average person out there, have 3 to 4 to 5 pairs of cheap kitchen plastic gloves. Use them, take them off carefully, not to contaminate the outside to touch the inside, into a plastic bucket of bleach. Leave it for 24 hours, hang it up, air dry it. What you don't want to do is reuse equipment because that is one of the methods that killed people in SARS in Toronto. They reused yellow gowns. They were told if it was for the same patient, it didn't matter, and they actually cross-contaminated the patient's SARS virus into themselves. And I think at least one, maybe two of the nurses at that centre died early on. And we don't really want you to die. Now, the other thing that people get all bent out of shape about is face masks. And again, unless you've got a full NBC 100% sealed suit on, it's not going to do you any good. I do recommend you get access to N95 masks, particulate masks. You can use the more expensive versions from the painting and stuff like that, but again, it runs into a problem, and the big problem is you use it once, you really have to never use it again, or have it decontaminated with bleach in contact. So if you're able to do that, it's fine, but I suspect most of you would probably be reusing the filter, and that's again another source of problem. Now, N95 masks come in all various shapes and sizes, and the bottom line with an N95 mask is that it has to fit. And you will see nurses with actual indentations in both their cheeks having worked a shift in one of these. Now, once this is on, the outside of this is actually going to be extremely contaminated. All the bugs and microbes are going to actually contaminate here, so you really don't want to be touching this at all. And in grit down pandemic situation, you don't want to be touching your hair, your face, your eyes, your glasses, or any of that stuff. So to take it off gently and dispose of it. And as you see, glasses are likely to fall off. Now, I do recommend that you get a pair of eyeglasses. If you've had laser surgery, good for you, I hope it works. If you haven't got any eye troubles at all, get some glasses, plain glasses. It stops any contamination going into the eyeball, which is also a problem in pandemic situations. So this is just a quick overview of some of the gear that I would use in a pandemic situation. And as I've said before, the hand cleaning is the most important. If you don't have hand coverage, if your arms are not covered by the gown, I think it's okay. What you would have to do is, having removed the equipment that you wear to protect yourself from touching the patients and having them touch you, is that you would have to clean starting here downwards with soap and water for about 15 to 30 seconds. You might even want to consider spraying yourself a bit with bleach and then washing off with soap and water. Depends on how bad it is. So that's this video on the pandemic series. It's just a quick introduction to it. I just wanted to bring in some gear and equipment, and that's the gear and equipment that you'll see in the videos when I start doing them, about how we're actually going to quarantine ourselves and quarantine others. Bearing in mind I work in a hospital environment, so I have hospital gear. So I always want this series to be focused on what you can do. What you can do without spending thousands of dollars online for stuff that honestly you can actually buy second-hand equipment, like plastic kitchen pennies and kitchen gloves, rubber gloves, and rubber boots, cheap rubber boots, that actually will work just as effectively. In fact, I would argue more effectively. If you think back to Ebola, what were the people wearing in Ebola? They were wearing plastic painting shoots, clothing. Sorry, that's Leslie setting the fire alarm off. She always does that when I video. I'm down in the basement, the dogs don't attack me. So a good solid plastic full bodysuit that you would use for painting, if you can have 10 of them, that's great. Reuse them by putting them in high density bleach after use. The same with the boots and the rest of it. Thinking all the time, the actual goal is not to touch the person. Now, this doesn't work very well if the virus or bacteria is airborne. Hence, you're going to need a mask. I think other than N95, the only way you can actually get over that is using a full sealed system. And again, that's going to be very problematic with the filters and decontaminating it. At worst, use a bandana that's been slightly damp over the mouth and tight as you can and get rid of it that way. Now again, into bleach, let them soak in bleach, strong concentration of bleach for a while and do it out. That is not a recommended thing that I would recommend that you do. I do recommend that the least you do is buy some N95 masks. These can be really expensive. I've seen prices for like $1 a mask. You really need to source it around, figure it out, and actually deal with it. The masks also come in various shapes and sizes. It doesn't really matter. They have to fit your face snugly and tightly. One of the methods you might want to use to test this, and I think this is a great test, is when you actually put the mask on and you've sealed the metal at the nose and the mask is on, you should see the mask moving, but you shouldn't feel air coming out anywhere. Air comes out here only. Now you can test that by using a really strong astringent smell. Let it off here. If you can't smell it, that's good. But that's only part of it. The other thing you want to do is actually work in the mask. Whoop, my head. Work in the mask and then make sure you can't smell the external stinky smell very strongly or at all, because otherwise the mask isn't working well when you're moving your head around, and that's what we do. That's what we will be doing. We won't just be standing there like that. So I hope you found this vaguely helpful. Like I say, I just want to do some background videos, so when I'm actually doing the scenario situations, you can actually see what we're doing. So that's basically what I would wear in grid down in a pandemic. If I was interacting with people I felt had the pandemic virus or might have the pandemic virus. So how long you quarantine for, where you quarantine, how you quarantine, we'll need background information and we'll need visuals for you guys to see why I would do it the way I would do it in my home as compared to how I would do it in hospital. Using the same ideas is what I would like to do, and hopefully you'll enjoy this series, and au revoir.